Hey, this is Greg from Purpose Blogger, and in today's video we're looking at some of my favorite Lightroom tricks that you may not know about. So keyboard shortcuts, features that are a little bit hidden. Some of these I bet you do not know, so let's dive right in and look at some of my favorite Lightroom hidden features. Okay, this first tip is a great one for maximizing your workspace, and it is simply using the Tab key to hide these side panels. So if I tap the Tab key, these side panels, they collapse. If you tap it again, they'll come back. Yes, you can use these triangles on the side, but you will find it's even easier and you save more time if you just get comfortable using that Tab key to hide those side panels. Now this is going to work in library mode. It's also going to work in develop panel. So it's a great tip wherever you are in your workflow. And if you want to supercharge this and hide this bottom panel, you can use the Shift plus Tab key. And the Shift and Tab key together, they are going to hide all those panels and see how much more workspace you have to work with there. And if you want to bring your tools back, just hit Shift Tab again, and it's going to bring back all those panels. So again, Tab key to hide panels. If you use the Shift plus the Tab key, you're going to hide not only the side panels, but the bottom panel as well. So that is a really nice way to maximize your workspace. Shift plus Tab, you're going to hide those panels. Okay, the next trick that I like to use is using the L key on your keyboard to enter lights out mode. So if you tap L once, it's going to start to dim all the screen around that, and if you tap it again, you're fully in lights out mode, and then if you tap L a third time, it will come back to the normal mode. Now, I did this now with that Shift Tab trick, and so that is really a great way to maximize your screen real estate, but this also works in other modes besides the develop mode. So if I did hit Shift Tab here, you'll see that if I do lights out mode here, it'll start to dim even with those panels open. It'll dim all those panels, and then you're fully in lights out mode, and you really can isolate that photo, and you can really see the photo stand out. So sometimes when you're editing, you could even come in as you edit and enter lights out mode and really see all your results on screen. And the other thing I'll say is that this lights out mode works regardless of whether you're on a single image or if you're in grid view. You can still enter your lights out mode like this. So this actually is a kind of a cool view if you want to go in, maybe you're trying to see what photos side by side are going to look at for your Instagram feed or whatever. You can enter lights out mode. You can see those pictures without distractions. Now the last thing I'll say about lights out mode is you'll notice now if I do, it goes to default to this black color, but you can come in under your preferences. So if you come in here under edit, you come down to preferences, and then under interface here you have this lights out mode, and by default it's black and the dim level is 80%, but you can come in and change that dim level if you want. And of course you can change the color, so maybe I'll go to white here, I'll click OK, and then if I hit lights out mode now I am seeing everything on that white background. So again, lights out mode, it's just a great way to remove distractions. You can do it in develop mode, you can do it in your grid mode, and you can really see your photo or photos without all those other distractions. Okay, this next Lightroom tip is just another interface trick, and it can really help you save time within the develop module, excuse me. So within here, you'll notice that you have a lot of panels. You probably are familiar with these. You have the basic, the tone curve, the color, split toning, and so on, all the way down. So sometimes it may be helpful to have all these open, and other times it may become a little bit overwhelming and a little bit confusing. So this trick involves using the Alt on your keyboard and then click on any panel, and you will switch from the basic expanded all mode to what's called solo panel mode. And if you right click now after the Alt click, you'll see that this solo panel is turned on. So if I click on any panel, all the other panels are going to stay closed, and you're just going to be in that solo panel mode. So it lets you see the one you want to work in, and it hides everything else. Now if I right click here and turn this back off, then I am in a mode now where I can again have multiple panels open. Again, I can use the Alt click to go back to solo mode, or I can just come here, solo mode. It's going to close all the other panels except the one you're working on. Now along with that, you can also right click and you can expand all, so everything's open, or you can right click on any panel sort of top here and collapse all, and everything is closed. So just know that you can go between expand all, solo mode, and then a mode where you can have multiple panels open. Knowing you can do this really helps you keep the interface clean and in a manner that it's going to work best for you. Okay, this next tip is just a few more interface shortcut keys that are really going to save you time. Now, the develop module and the library module those are probably the two modules where you're almost certainly going to spend the most time. So I like to know those keyboard shortcuts for just jumping back and forth. Of course, you can click up here, but if you have panels hidden or whatever, you might not always see that. So I like to use the G key for jumping to the library mode, and then the D key over to develop mode. So again, if I tap D, I'm going to jump into develop mode, G back to library. So again, D for develop, G for library. Now within the library module, it's good to know that you can also add in the E key to jump into loop view, and that just means when you tap E, you're just going to see that one single selected photo, and when you tap G, you're back to grid view. So again, E to go to that single loop view, and then G back to grid mode. So combine those two keyboard shortcuts, D and G, for jumping back between develop and library. And then within the library module, make sure you remember G plus the E key lets you go between that loop view and that grid view. And these things just help save you time jumping between the different modules within Lightroom. So make sure you know these keyboard shortcuts. Okay, the next hidden feature that's helpful to know is what I call double-click resets. So I'm in the develop module now, and here I'm just going to come down here. I'm going to drag this texture way to the right. What you need to know is that you can double-click on different elements here, and you can reset their value. So this slider is way to the right. If you double-click on our slider, you double-click on the name, you will reset that value to 0. So another thing to know is if I have multiple sliders and you want to reset a group at a time, you can click on the group name. So here I am under the presence group. If I double click presence, all of those sliders reset. So just knowing that you can do double click resets is really helpful when you want to just set something back to the default value, or you want to set a group back to that default center value. Now this is especially helpful if you're in here under making local adjustments of some sort. So this works under all the adjustment tools. So just for example, I'm going to come in here and I'm dragging out a radial filter up there, and I'm just going to drag in a bunch of settings like this. So what tends to happen is sometimes when you come in under the tools, they have all these values reset from the last time you make a local adjustments. You forget what is turned on and what's turned off. So I like to use this double click trick just to click on effect, double click, and I like to zero out all the effects when I come in and I start making another local adjustment. So that's where this double click reset trick is very helpful. Still within these local area adjustment tools, another trick I love is using O on your keyboard to bring up a visual overlay, a color overlay. So if I tap O, I get this green overlay, and it shows me that the area affected is actually being the area outside of this circle. Of course, if you tap the invert on your keyboard here, you can change that, and so that overlay is just letting me know exactly what area is being affected by the current adjustment. Helpful in here if you're doing a radial filter, but super helpful also under this brush tool. All the local adjustments, the graduated filter, you can all do this trick where you use the O key on your keyboard to bring up a color overlay. Now you can also use Shift plus O and you can change the color of that overlay. So now I'm going to white, and if I cycle through, that's sort of a gray and then a red and then back to green. So again, bringing up a visual overlay, and then Shift plus O, you can change the color of that overlay so it lets you know exactly what area of your photo is being affected by the current adjustments that you have made. Okay, next trick that you may know, but I'm going to mention it just in case because it is really helpful, and that's knowing the undo and redo keyboard shortcuts on your keyboard. And those are going to be Control Z for undoing something. It's going to be Control Y if you want to redo something. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag out the texture all the way to the right, and then I'll drag out this, and then I'll drag out the next, and so on. And so you made a bunch of edits here. Let's say you wanted to undo these edits. So I'm just going to use Control Z on my keyboard. It'll step back through one, Control Z again, Control Z. So each time I hit Control Z, it is just taking a step back in the history there and undoing that last keystroke. If you find that you want to redo something, same thing, except this time Control Y, and I'm using Control Y, and I'm redoing those history states, those last edits that I made. And again, stepping back to one we mentioned already, of course, if I wanted to reset this whole panel, remember you can use that shift click, or double click I should say, and you will reset that entire panel. The next trick is one for when you're in the develop module under the crop tool. And so I'm under the crop tool now. I'm going to bring that up, and it is simply to use the O key on your keyboard to cycle through the overlay here. You actually have different options for the overlay, so it starts as a grid there, but then if you do it again and you continue to cycle through, you get things like the golden rule, you get other crop ratios shown on screen. So again, the O key under the crop tool will let you cycle through some different overlays. And remember, this O key is also helpful for things like the color overlay before we talked about when making local adjustments. But if you're under the crop tool, use that O key to cycle through the overlay and find the crop overlay that you like the best. Okay, the next trick is using the A key to toggle auto mask on and off on the fly. But first, let's make sure we understand what this auto mask feature does. So here I am in under the adjustment brush, and so we learn best through example here. So I'm going to turn this off for a second, and now with this adjustment brush, if I come out here and I paint over this edge here with my brush like this, you're going to see that spill over past the plate to this whole area that the brush is covering. But let me hit Control Z on my keyboard for a second, and when I do that, we see that overlay disappears. Again, I have O. Using the O key, you can toggle that overlay on and off. I'm using it as a visual aid here, but so now auto mask, I'm going to turn it on this time, and now watch what it does. What auto mask does is when you have a clear edge like the edge of the plate here, that auto mask will let you and keep you from spilling over the edge. So if I paint again now, you can watch, and even though my brush is going over the edge, you can see from that green that my adjustment is not going over that edge. And the whole key here is to have this plus icon within the area of the edge. If I have the plus icon like this, then it will spill over. So I'm going to hit Control Z just to undo that keystroke, to undo what I painted there, that brush stroke. And so watch, if I have that plus icon over the edge, then it's going to constrain it from the other side. But if I have my plus icon within the area here, now the brush stroke's just going to be on this side. And then the additional tip is the A key on the fly. If you use the A key, now I can toggle that brush on and off. So A toggles it on and off. So if I toggle it off on something like if I was painting over this rice or this garnish here, I might want it toggled off because there are a lot of little edges here and I don't want to sort of miss spots. I want to get all of this as part of my mask. But then if I came over here to something like the spoon, I might want to toggle it back on because I want to make sure that I have this constrained to just the area of the spoon. So again, that is the A key for toggling the auto mask on and off on the fly. And the other tip would be use that plus, that little plus in the center of the brush. That is going to basically dictate where it looks for that edge. Again, if I do it on this side, since I'm within the edge of the bowl here, it's going to look on that side and have that be the constraining edge. But if I move to the other side, then it changes where that constraining mark is. So that is the auto mask feature. You can use the A key to toggle it on and off, and you can use that plus icon in the center of your brush as your guide. Make sure that's within the edge that you want to constrain to. My next trick is to use the Alt key in combination with different sliders within Lightroom to get different visual cues that are helpful. Now I'm going to show you my two favorite examples, but there are multiple places you can do this within Lightroom, so you can just experiment around and see. But I'll show you my two favorites. So let's just say I wanted to adjust exposure here, but I want to make sure I don't blow out highlights or I don't get too many shadow areas. Now, of course, you could use your histogram and see that information visually, or if you hover over these triangles, you'll get clipping and highlight warnings. But also, if I use the Alt key when I drag this exposure slider, and I use it in combination, then suddenly it's going to give me just a visual view on screen that shows me where those highlights start to show up. So all those white areas on the screen are now those areas where highlights are starting to get blown out and go completely to white. And so if I drag that back, I can drag this back to the point where I just lose those highlights. And then I know I've exposed my image and I've pushed it just to the edge of that white area where highlights start to get blown out. Now, of course, I can drag this up and down. I can watch the histogram above, but if I want to use that Alt key before I drag, then it's going to switch over and it's going to give me that view, and it's going to let me see where things start to blow out. And I can go back to just before that point, and once that becomes all black and I lose those white areas, I now know I have no completely blown out areas in my photo. So as I stated, that's one of my favorite areas to use it. The other one I would say is if you do your sharpening within Lightroom. So I'm going to come down here to the details panel, And this is another place where I would highly recommend and use this Alt key. So if I'm dragging out the amount of sharpening here, that can start to change. But this masking feature here, so if you don't do this when you sharpen in Lightroom, you really should. And what this mask area does is just to a finer and finer degree, it will apply the sharpening to just the edges. And that's what you want to do, because you want the edge areas to be sharp, but then other areas of your photo, if you start to make them sharp, it may look a little weird, and you're also adding unnecessary information and unnecessary file size to your photo. But so if I drag out this Alt key, I'm going to get that same black and white display that I saw before, and it's going to start to show me exactly what areas are being sharpened. So if you're familiar with masking inside Photoshop or something like that, you probably know that white is showing the areas that are going to be affected by the sharpening, and the black areas will not. So with the Alt key, as I drag out here to the right, you'll see on screen that visual start to change, and you'll see that I'm getting finer and finer, masking out more and more. So I'm just applying the sharpening to whatever areas I want, just really those edge areas. And so again, I'll turn that off. And so now if I drag the amount slider here, I can pump this up and know that I am just affecting this area down here. That's the area that's getting affected when I drag out this amount slider. So again, use that Alt key in combination with some of these sliders, and you're really going to get some great visual aids that help you in your editing. For the last Lightroom hidden trick I want to talk about today, I'm going to talk about snap zooming and panning. So you already probably know that here up in this little navigator pane, you can change the degree to which you're zoomed in. So right now it's on fit to screen. If I hit fill, it's going to fill totally. If I go to 1:1 and zoom in all the way into the 1:1 ratio, up here I can change, and I can go to 2:1. I can choose different ratios. So I'm going to go back to my fit over here. And then maybe I also want to use a 1:1, so I'll click on that one there. And so now that I have that, I want to talk about how do you pan within this screen, and a quick way to easily zoom out and have it snap back to the zoomed in view. So for example, let's just say here I am, and I am in here under the develop module, and I have an adjustment brush. And so maybe I want to come in and add some detail here. So I'm going to drag up this texture because I want a little bit more texture on the spoon here. Get the size of the brush the way I want it. And I can start painting in here, and I'm painting in this extra detail. But now if I use the Z key on my keyboard, if you tap the Z key, it's going to take you back to that next step, the last zoom, so it's going to go out to fit. If I tap, it goes back in. But watch what happens if I just hold the Z key and then release it. So I can do this snap zooming by holding the Z key while I'm zoomed in like that, and then as soon as I release it, it's going to snap back in. So if I wanted to paint a little bit, and then I want to snap out to see what it looks like, I'm just holding that Z. As soon as I release it, it takes me right back into that view that I'm working in. So it's a great way to work in under a zoomed magnification. Tap Z, hold it down to get back out to see the full view. And then as soon as I release it, it's going to snap back in. Now if you just tap it once, it goes to the other view. Tap it again, it goes to the wide view. But so when you're zoomed in, if you click and hold the Z key, it's just going to snap out temporarily. As soon as you release it, it snaps back in. And of course the pan trick, which you may know, but if you hold down the space bar, then you can pan around. So if I'm panning around, I find another area where I want to sharpen. So I do a little painting, add a little texture there. I want to see what that looks like. I'm just going to hold down the Z key for a second, see what it looks like at full view there. And then I release it and I snap right back into that zoomed in view. So that's snap zooming, and that's how to pan around when you're zoomed in. And I really hope you've enjoyed all these hidden tricks within the Lightroom interface that really let you get even more out of your workflow. And these are great tools and great tips for saving time. Thanks for watching. Please hit that subscribe button below, and in the comments below, let me know what is your favorite Lightroom feature.